I am here with Scott Santens. Thank you so much for coming, Scott. And also, we have Angelo, Faye D, Hannah Wan, Ariel, Feiku, and Moto. We are all basic income advocates. We are eager to talk to Scott Santens, perhaps at the vanguard of the basic income movement, or close to it, I would say. So thank you again. If everyone would like to just very quickly introduce themselves, and then Scott can just say who he is for anyone who's watching and listening does not know who he is, and then we'll have an open discussion. So Angelo, if you could just please in brief say hello, say who you are.
Well, my name is Angelo Mendoza. I am a UBI advocate and a member of the Yang Gang attempting to discuss this issue with Congress.
Thank you. Faye D.
Hello, I'm Faye Doney. My username is @TizDoney, TISDONEY, and been working hard to continue Yang's message.
Thank you. And Hannah Wan.
Hi, my name's Hannah Wan. I am a citizen advocate for universal basic income and also Asian American representation. I'm currently senior staff with David Kim for Congress. #YesWeKim. I'm on Twitter @NowHannah1.
Thank you. Moto.
Hi, I'm kind of like the resident Bernie bro, I guess, here, but also UBI endorsing individual. I'm a longtime friend of Shales, and we talk politics a lot.
We do. I'd say he's one of my political gurus, even. Faye Koo. Thank you, Moto.
Hi, I'm currently running for national delegate for Biden in Texas Senate District 3. But I'm usually a UBI advocate and full-on Yang Gang, and everybody knows about that. So I think that's about it.
Thank you very much, Faye. And Ariel.
Hi, my name is Ariel Bakshande. I guess I can introduce myself as a Toastmasters High Achiever Award winner. I love to public speak, and you can find me on Twitter at Ariels_Armada. So that's at ARIELS_ARMADA. And I would run for Congress in my district under UBI as a Republican if someone were willing to fund me. Let's put that out there.
Awesome. Thank you, Ariel. And Sheridan here. No,
and I also have a YouTube channel, Revolutionary Thinking. Just want to put that.
Thanks. Sorry for cutting you off. And Sheridan, are you here?
Yes, I am indeed here. I'm Sheridan. I am a small business manager in New Mexico, and you can find me at JSaberGamer on Twitter.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sheridan. So Scott, thank you again for coming. Please introduce yourself, and then we will open the floor for discussion.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here today, everybody. And thanks for even starting up this channel stuff in the first place. My name is Scott Santens, and I'm a basic income advocate. I've been at this since 2013, and I actually crowdfunded my own basic income starting in 2016. So I've been living with it, which has enabled me to focus on it full time, to write about it, to know more about it, actually having experienced it. And I knew Yang since before I started running, and that was really exciting to hear that he was going to do that, and I was 100% behind that. And it was just transformative to see his run, watch how much he transformed the conversation. And I actually joined Mike Breuer's campaign in February after Yang dropped out, and that was to push his senatorial run against Mitch McConnell. So the primary in Kentucky is coming up on June 23rd. And some big news today, too, where Yang actually endorsed Mike today. So that's some of that breaking news going on right now. And that was a big deal, and I'm happy to have the endorsement. And let's hope we can do this.
That's awesome. Yeah, is Mike's doing an AMA right now, isn't he? Or while we do this.
So I don't remember exactly what time it is, but it's definitely today. In fact, that room, I should double check that.
So we've got Scott Santens. A brief window of time now, but please, anyone who would like to begin talk with what we have.
I have a quick question for you. So I was looking at what a healthy society looks like, and I stumbled upon something that you and Yang both liked, and I'm curious where your source came from when coming up with UBI and all the other statistics. Like, I remember seeing your a lecture that you gave, and you had a lot of statistics, and I'm just curious, what kind of sources you used to help launch yourself forward.
Gosh, I mean, a lot of sources. A lot of sources. I try to focus on the evidence, and a lot of my sources, let's say when it comes to experiments, comes from like the actual experiments. That was something that I dove into when I first discovered the idea, and that was something that really drew me. Anyways, the fact that there were actually all these experiments even out there with data, and so just read those really long reports. I still recommend that people even read something like the Namibia study. It's, I think, like a couple hundred pages long, and there's an entire book about the India program. But yeah, that's a lot of information in there, and there's also just there's data from the 1970s experiments in the U.S. and in Canada. A bunch of stuff written about that, and more recently, there's a lot of unconditional cash transfer stuff. Like, cash transfers have been something that's been on the rise pretty much since the turn of the century. And unconditional cash transfers, as opposed to conditional cash transfers, there's been a lot more of that. It's been growing a lot. And so there's a lot of data out there, too, to learn from as far as what happens when people receive this unconditional cash with no, they can do anything they want with and don't have to qualify, for. And also, when it comes to like data in general, it's just apply like critical thinking as you do anything. Like what makes sense? What do you think is actually credible data in what isn't? And I don't know. But when it comes to basic income and unconditional cash transfers in general, there's just there's a lot out there, and it's just clearly positive.
Well, since no one else has questions, I guess. We had a list, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was wondering if we can go back to the conversation we were having before we started recording. I thought that was really interesting. We started talking about like money as speech. And for myself, I feel like there's this discussion about universal basic income kind of being like a magic bullet for anything. And I kind of feel like the discussion on universal basic income should be focused on covering basic needs, because it'll be great if people had extra cash to spend on political campaigns, but that's not really what it's for, So what do you think about like maybe limiting the discussion of, I guess, what the primary purpose of universal basic income is?
I think there's a lot of ways to talk about UBI, and I think they're all correct because each person has their own, say, preference as what's like important to them. Even defining basic income, a lot of people think that it has to be like a certain amount of money, and it doesn't. It's really just about the design of it, the fact that it's fully universal, that it's unconditional, that it's regularly provided, and it's per individual. So you can actually have a very small UBI. And so, when smaller it is, obviously it's kind of more towards basic needs, but at the same time, it's entirely unconditional. So it goes to rich and poor, which means that if you already, because you're earning, say, $3,000 a month or $4,000 a month or whatever, then it changes the way that you look at that. So it removes, let's say, the insecurity behind being able to cover your basic needs. But at the same time, if you already have an income, then it's adding to it at the same time as strengthening it, in which case you use it for other things. And so if, obviously someone who's barely getting by is not going to be able to use their basic income as, say, democracy dollars, which is why, it's effective to have that separate policy to get at least $100 per person as far as a voucher goes to help pay for the campaigns that they want. Because even if you're essentially entirely broke, then you can't use that money on, say, your basic needs. You have to use it on campaign spending. And so, there's, in that way, you're limited. But then for someone who has their basic needs covered, they very well could use, let's say, the entire $1,000 a month to actually go into political campaigns. Like, that could be their thing, and obviously you have your limits for one person, but you could actually put $1,000 a month into, a bunch of different people's campaigns throughout the year. But there's so many other things you could use it on too. And I think that it's important to recognize the creativity involved as far as the way people use it as well. Like it's almost like a fingerprint that each person kind of uses their money in different distributions for different things. And that's one of the reasons why UBI is so effective, is because whereas other things try to say, okay, here's this amount for this and this amount for this and this amount for this, basic income is saying, well, here, and you can decide for yourself where that money goes. But I think really kind of the key power behind basic income and what I stress over the money part too. And I know Yang has talked about that as well, that it's not so much about the money, it's about what the money enables. It's that this unconditionality of it is absolutely primary, because if you know you're going to get it no matter what, then that's where power comes from. That's the power to say no. That's the power to do what you want with it and not have to answer anybody. Universality is also extremely important, because then you don't have that stigma involved. And it also helps with the feeling that you've earned it, because you're not different than other people. Those things are, I think, the primary of importance. And I think the money part of it is at least the amount of money part is the least. It's about all that it enables. I like to say that kind of the definition of basic income is not so much like the typical definition, but it's just you're thinking of, say, the answer to the question, what is it that you're not doing because your basic needs are not provided on a monthly basis? It's like, what is it that you're not doing? And if you can think about what it is that you would do if you had this secure amount of income every month, then that's what it is, because that's what it is to you. It's kind of a personal definition.
Angela?
I'd like to play off that personal definition if I can. You're in favor of an American scorecard type policy like Andrew Yang was proposing, correct, Scott?
Yeah.
How would you implement it into our tax code so that businesses are actually incentivized to adhere to it?
It's like a step-by-step kind of thing. So you'd start off, and it's really society going, okay, profit is not the most important thing. What is important? We decide that living longer is important, that health is important, that reduced suicide rates and reduced incidences of cancer and heart disease and these things are important. And I think that corporations and these things kind of follow suit. They're part of society, and it's up to society to determine what is important. And so you'd have to even like this. It's not like corporations really changed so much in the first place. It's not like there were kind of laws that were different. It was like a culture that changed as far as the primacy of the profit motive and the return to shareholders being the absolute most important thing. And so, if we're going to shift out of that, then it's an entire cultural mind shift change where we have to, everyone running those companies and everyone who's buying stock in those companies, it's that they are what matters to them more, instead of what has mattered for the last couple decades, is now actually what matters to humanity and how we together define what is more important to us.
So you mind if I jump in? It's like we all know how important and how critical this UBI idea is, but what can we do in our own personal way to kind of get the ball rolling more? And what are the biggest roadblocks that you've seen, and what can we all do to just help in any way that we can?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And first of all, I like to say that as far as getting involved, what is it you can do to get involved? That again is like a personal answer. You need to find something that you can continually do and be not just okay, but you would derive some kind of meaning from continually doing it. I could not do what I've been doing for years if I wasn't somehow meaningful. I would have worn out a long time ago too if I thought that what I was doing, it needed to have some time limit. Like if I didn't achieve something within a certain amount of time, then it was failed and I had to move on to something else. Like I've looked at this as being like a long-term marathon kind of situation where I have to just keep on going and going and going. And so part of it is figuring out, okay, so what can I do that I can keep doing? So for me, that was writing, researching, writing about blogs. And I also, to kind of change it up, I started doing more like podcasts as far as like making those available audio wise. Also, it's fun to be able to do stuff like this, have like guest appearances and conversations. Like all of it together is something that I enjoy doing, and trying to connect with people, and just all of that. It really, my answer to that question is just trying to do anything that I can. So when someone asks me what they can do, yeah, the answer is whatever you can do that you actually would like to keep doing and stick to doing. And then don't be afraid to change it up. Like if you get tired of something and want to focus on something else, then, do that. Don't feel that you have to be, that there's only one way of going about it. And of course, there's more direct kind of typical answers. So, you can make sure and say bug your representatives about it. Like if you can become that person where they're like annoyed by you, then at least they remember you and know why they're annoyed by you. And so if there's more people that become that, then the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So it's a matter of becoming that squeaky wheel. And so that's calling and mailing your reps, and of course with our trending hashtag today with Yang Gang Congress, it's about getting involved, running for not only Congress, but there's lots of local positions that you can do to be more involved there. And even though it's not like you can't immediately say implement basic income, you can be like that, like the mayor of Stockton who decided to, help get that going in his city. And I think that there's room there too. And I've seen this like in other countries as well, where especially in Canada, say you can start getting, say, city councils to like vote on basic income and say just in support of it. It's not about passing it, but just saying support of it. And if you get, city council after city council, then suddenly you're like, wait a second, there's 100 city councils that have voted in support of this. This is like showing support. And then that's what politicians pay attention to as well. So really it's about trying to get the attention of people and building that movement within people, and getting the attention of those with like larger networks and, politicians, media. There's just so many different ways of going about this, and the more people who are involved and from all these different kinds of angles, then that's how we get things going.
Great, thank you so much. Hannah, did you want to say something? There's no need to be called on or anything. Angelo said that you did want to interject though, so I do want to give you the chance.
Thank you. Actually. Okay, so my candidate is running in a district that is very progressive, or has a huge progressive population. And I think what I kind of learned from the Yang campaign in talking about UBI is that I understand the whole messaging towards, I guess, middle class people. Like, how can UBI help you even though you're doing okay? Like, I totally understand that way of messaging, but I feel like maybe we're glossing over the basic part. It's just like the visceral, like we are going to take care of people in poverty. It's like, so I feel like maybe that was the reason behind the progressive pushback on UBI, because we were pushing UBI so hard that we didn't really consider the ecosystem of progressive policies. So it's like, yeah, you can pay your medical premiums with UBI. It's like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. We should push Medicare for all, or universal health care, and also UBI. So what do you feel about like making, I guess, UBI more integral instead of just speaking so much to UBI, like make it like part of a suite of progressive policies to really hit home that we are trying to take care of people, and UBI is one way to do it.
Yeah, so you're touching upon even like a lot of the misinformation that was put out there by progressives as well, and part of that was because Yang was running against Bernie Sanders and others, and being a part of a primary, there was an excuse to straight up lie about Yang's policies. So Yang was running on universal health care and basic income, and yet he still had to fight against this conversation that, basic income was like helped you pay for your premiums, and that he wanted to eliminate Medicaid and Medicare and all this crap. And of course, that wasn't true. I mean, he was for both of those things. And I like to make a point of stressing that UBI is a floor. It's a missing floor, and it's almost like we built like a house or a building on just bare earth, and now
Quicksand.
yeah, and the windows are cracking, there's cracks in the walls, and the stuff is falling apart. And this is happening because we didn't build it on a foundation. And so, the thing about basic income is that this is an elevated foundational floor that no one is allowed to fall beneath. And so, right now, before even this all happened, we had 13 million people in poverty in America who are receiving nothing from the federal government. And the left doesn't like to talk about that. They don't like to discuss or even acknowledge the holes in the safety net, because there's a belief that if they talk about those holes, then it actually helps the conservatives further destroy the safety net. And so there's kind of yes, we recognize there's a problem, we don't want to talk about it, or there's let's pretend that there is no problem and let's not talk about it. But the thing about UBI is it does fix all those holes by creating a floor over all that. And when we do have that foundational floor, of course, we still need to build walls and we still need to structure on top of it. But it does make sense to look at what it is we're building on it and ask questions and figure out what does make sense. So without a floor, there's all sorts of things that we need because we don't have that floor. But then when we have it, then okay, so there's some programs that we don't need anymore. There's some programs that we should be smaller and exist on top of it. And there's some programs that should absolutely be fully on top of it without any reduction of it at all. And I think a good example of that is, of course, healthcare, which should be universal. And you're really looking at education, which also should be on top of it and universal, I think. So, and also, I just want to touch upon those things first, too. I just want to mention that when you see the things that operate on top of basic income, they function better because they're on top of it. And so a universal healthcare system, you would have that on top of it, but then you would need less for it because people would be healthier. And we know that from the experiments. We know that so much of 80-90% of health outcomes are from the social determinants of health. There's just so much that we're treating downstream that we would not need to treat if we avoided it upstream by having a healthier population. And then with education, it's a similar thing where, Yang liked to talk about how there's only so much teachers can do. And because so much of it is the home environment. So if you make sure that students have a better home environment through this unconditional basic economic security, then they can actually focus on their school and they can graduate at better rates. They can have, get better grades. They can graduate through the system and actually have learned more because of it. So the dollars that we spend on that would actually go further if we had that floor. And so if you can imagine that floor and how important it is, then it makes sense that, those other things can still exist on top of it and be better for it.
So should all inevitable needs be on that floor? It's inevitable that we need a safe space to live, and it's inevitable that we need somewhere that we can go to the bathroom. It's inevitable we need to have food. Is that kind of something that we could even shift towards getting those particular needs away from organizations that take money are very greedy with these particular inevitable needs? Because I think there's just a lot of greed, even just with medical, it seems like that causes a problem.
Yeah, and I don't even want to get into the whole nonprofit industrial complex, so that's another conversation entirely. So
yeah, no, there is a whole poverty industry that exists because of the fact that we don't have a basic income really, and that's a big problem too. But yeah, there's, as far as figuring out the best way to meet all these different needs and more important wants that we consider to be needs, let's look at something like internet access. This is something that everyone should have. We want to focus on making sure that there's broadband access to every person in the country, just like the postal system works. And so what is the best way of doing that? Is it, cities doing kind of municipal stuff, and it's like city by city, and it's like, say, granted with grants by the federal government, and then do you do like public utilities, or is it better to do like public-private partnerships kinds of thing where you're able to use those dollars to have, companies compete over that and do that? Like there's a lot of different ways to go about this. And that's obviously one of the reasons why money is so effective, because, if these things don't already exist already, then you got to figure out some way to get access to it. So, even if you don't have municipal broadband where you are, if you have money, at least you can pay for it. And part of the problem with like rural areas too is there's not enough money there to make that, investment make sense. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we need to do. And, I don't like to think that basic income is a cure-all for everything, but I do think that it's like a skeleton key that can unlock a lot of these doors that are presently locked without it. That so many problems become more solvable once we actually take our daily survival off the table, and that we actually feel secure and don't have to spend so much time worrying about how we're going to make it by every month.
And Congressman Tim Ryan joins us at this point in the recording, so we switch over to focusing on him pretty abruptly. And this recording is continued in episode 62, where we talk to Tim Ryan.